I'm Dr. Benjamin F. Chavis Jr., and this is how to get your money right. We welcome to this episode of How to Get Your Money Right. One of our nation's leading career coach, financial strategist, author, Will Roundtree.
How you doing, sir?
Welcome to the How to Get Your Money Right.
Pleasure's all mine. Thank you.
So, man, you come out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but you really, your base is in Las Vegas.
Yes, been out there for 20 years now.
So tell us, how did you get into the financial services arena? How did you get into helping people to get on a pathway to wealth building?
Absolutely. So it started out really as a personal need. But if I was to rewind and start back from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, you know, I was told just like everyone else, go to school, get good grades, get a good job. And after I graduated high school, so I actually graduated high school in Mississippi, believe it or not.
Okay.
Then moved back to Milwaukee, started working, and I was at this company. I thought I was going to retire from this job. And so I was working there for about 8 years. And then one day on August 13th, they told us that the company had been sold to a hedge fund. August 14th, I go in, there were chains on the door. And so I thought I was going to retire from there. I was literally marking the years off on the calendar so I can get the gold pin, the watch, and the whole package. And so from that standpoint, I didn't know what I was going to do with myself. So fortunately, got introduced to entrepreneurship through network marketing. And so got into network marketing in around 1997 through 2003. Didn't know much about entrepreneurship.
Network marketing online, how did you do it?
So network marketing, direct sales,
okay.
Similar to like Amway, Avon.
Okay, gotcha.
We were selling legal services.
Okay.
And so didn't make much money, but the thing that I took away from that, Doc, was the personal development. I would say that's really what changed my life more than anything. And so while I was, going through the personal development, started learning how to change my thought process, changing the way I think, change my mindset, because, I'm a young kid from Milwaukee where all I knew was, the pimps, the drug dealers, like that's all I saw, growing up. And so I was fortunate enough to meet a mentor at the time who saw more in me than I saw in myself. And so he started really just pouring into me and getting me to look at the bigger picture of life. And it was more so me believing in myself. Being a young black male from Milwaukee, we wasn't taught to have confidence or believe in ourselves. And so fast forward to 2005, he was building a team out in Las Vegas, Nevada. So he came to me one time and said, Will, would you be open to moving out of Milwaukee? And I was, open-minded to it because while I was in Milwaukee, like I say, even though I was in that network marketing company, life wasn't going well for me, or as they would say, life was lifing. And so fortunately enough, I took on the opportunity. I didn't have any money, so he actually gave me $500 to kind of jumpstart my living opportunity out in Las Vegas. And $500 doesn't go far. So when I actually did move to Las Vegas, and I remember the day, October 5th, 2005, I bought a one-way ticket on AirTran Airlines. I don't even think AirTran is still around. And so when I got out there, quickly found out that life is very expensive. The $500 didn't go far. Found myself, homeless, couch surfing, taking showers at the local gyms. But before I moved out to Las Vegas, I had another mentor who was in the finance industry who gave me a piece of information that stuck with me. And he said, eventually credit will become the new dollar. Didn't know what he meant by that at the time, but when I was in Las Vegas, I quickly found out because, I couldn't rent an apartment without putting 3 times the deposit down, couldn't buy a vehicle without getting a cosigner or putting 30% down. And so I started to learn what was this thing called credit, because we wasn't taught this. My parents never talked about it. They never talked about it in school. And so I would literally go to the library. I would go to the internet cafe because I couldn't afford the internet back in 2005. And I would just research as much as I could about finances, about credit, about economics. And I started
So you were self-taught?
Self-taught, yes. No professor, nobody guided me. But it started because I was going through something that I couldn't figure out. And I was literally driving myself insane because I kept getting the exact same results when it came to money. And so as I started to learn about these principles and concepts called credit, I started to learn that there's two different sides about credit. We were just taught about the consumer side. I had to learn about the economic side about credit. And so from that standpoint, I literally took 2 years to repair my credit, because at that time I had 2 vehicles that had been repoed. I had owed every single credit card company at the time. And I literally was on the verge of filing bankruptcy.
So it is possible to improve your credit.
Oh, absolutely.
You don't have to stay down.
Absolutely, you don't. And that's one of the motivators that drove me to learning more about it. And so from 2007 to 2012, I started to really immerse myself on it. And then in 2012, I was able to purchase a vehicle with no money down. It blew me away because I was so used to buying a new vehicle every tax season with my tax refund, because I thought I always had to put 30% down on a vehicle that wouldn't last to the next tax season. Then in 2013, I was able to purchase my first home. Now, obviously, I'm working a job at the time. And coming from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, I never even thought home ownership was possible. And so from that standpoint, I said, if this was helpful for me, and I know it could be helpful for other people, but more importantly, I never heard anybody in my circle, in my family, my friends group, my social group talk about credit or ownership. So I literally just started going around telling people like I was sharing a good movie, and it really just kind of morphed into my own personal needs.
You've written an outstanding book.
Yes, sir.
Credit is King.
Yes.
Tell us about this book.
Yeah, so Credit is King is more like a manual. People like to call it a how-to, but the interesting thing is I wrote it from a 8th grade level, because one of the things that I've learned in this space is that a lot of people get intimidated when you're talking about money, finances, credit, because most people don't understand the jargon, the words, and it can be boring, it can be monotonous. So I wanted to write it from a manual standpoint. So if a person has an objection or come through a hurdle from a credit standpoint, they literally can just go to the table of contents and figure out, okay, how do I fix that problem? So whether it's dealing with the collection agency, whether it's dealing with, how to, what's a real credit score? Where can I pull my credit from? The components of what makes up a credit score. Because one of the things that a lot of people have a misconception is that they think that credit is bad. And it's not that credit is bad, it's just we haven't been taught how to properly use it from an economic standpoint. We've only been taught how to use it from a consumer standpoint. And more importantly, a lot of people don't believe that they can actually repair their credit. It's nothing illegal about it. It's actually, our right per the Fair Credit Reporting Act. You have the right to dispute anything that's inaccurate, incomplete, and unverifiable. So when you go and dispute the information or the components on your credit report, it's not that you're disputing that it's not yours or that you haven't been late. You're disputing based upon, let's say you owe a credit card company $1,000. They have to prove that whatever the dollar amount they're reporting, that is accurate down to the penny. And sometimes that information isn't accurate. Or the last date of activity, meaning when that account went into default. Sometimes on a credit report, because there's 3 different credit bureaus. You have Experian, TransUnion, and Equifax. And you'll be surprised how all of them can report different information on the last date of activity, which is a grounds for you to be able to dispute that being inaccurate. And if so, they have to actually remove it from your credit report.
Oh, that's great information. In terms of young people watching the show,
yes,
we have an intergenerational audience, but I would say everybody would like to know how to get their money right.
Absolutely.
What are the 3 top things that you would advise, Will, based on your own lived experience, for people to get on the pathway toward wealth building?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I would say the first thing is that they have to change their mindset about money. I always say that I can teach you how to run, but if you don't have a plan on where you're running to, you're just, aimlessly running. And I think a lot of the times, and more so than often, people, when they have a goal financially or a wealth building goal, they're just aimlessly trying to make a bunch of money, but that doesn't equate to the wealth, which is why often a lot of the times people can make a lot of money, but they're still finding themselves at a financial deficit. So the first thing is you have to change your mindset. You have to have a plan, you have to set a goal, and you have to figure out what it is that you want ultimately at the end of that goal. Some people say, you know what, Will, I want to make $100,000 a year. Some people say, Will, I want to be able to retire at a certain age. Those are two different goals. So we have to plan strategically for those. Number two, you have to budget. I think one of the biggest things that a lot of people run into, no matter how much money they make, they're over leveraged. And so I have this term that I ask a lot of the people that I work with is I ask them, do you know your number? And when they ask me, what does that mean? I said, do you know how much you actually make? Not how much the jobs say that you make or the jobs say they pay you, because if the company pays you $75,000, that's not how much that goes to your bank account. Right. You still have taxes, you have state tax, you have FICA, you have Social Security tax, you might contribute to a retirement fund. So you have to figure out how much you actually bring home minus your expenses. And then we have to calculate how much are you spending towards your expenses. Most people overspend on, housing and auto. So we have to figure out, a budget. And then thirdly, we have to figure out where we want to deploy our money. A lot of the times people aren't putting their money in the right place so that it's not working for them properly. So that way, by the time they get to the age of retirement, they either have to find themselves going back into the workplace or figuring out how to, sustain the rest of their living years. So we have to be able to direct our money in certain places so it can work for us.
What should one major in college or concentrate in school if they want to get a sort of a jump on entrepreneurship and wealth building?
So, that can be a tricky question, only because I think that life and experience is what guides you on the path of entrepreneurship.
Okay.
I would say that if you are going to college, what I would recommend is finding an industry that is going to be beneficial to what it is you want to accomplish, or look at college like a business decision. So when I'm sitting down with my clients, our main focus is for every dollar you invest into your life, into your business, what is the return on investment or ROI? We have to look at college the exact same way. So when I'm sitting down with parents who are getting ready to send their children to college, I'm saying, okay, if your child is getting ready to go to school for whatever the major is, what's the return on investment? What's the entry-level salary? Is there potential for growth in that industry? And so now also the second phase of that, can they take that information that they're going to gain from that degree and actually start their business? So if one is going to school for engineering, let's not just go to school to work for somebody else's firm. Let's get the data, let's get the information, and then let's figure out how to start your own engineering firm. If you're going to school to be an attorney, I work with a lot of people in professional industries or professional degrees. I'm showing them, hey, let's start your own practice. So I don't think it's necessarily a particular industry or degree they go to school for. Mm-hmm. I think it's how they utilize the data that they're getting, but then also looking into a degree that's going to be beneficial for them from an ROI standpoint.
Return on investment.
Return on investment.
Financial literacy, broadly speaking. How important is financial literacy to what you do or to what everyone involved in trying to make progress for themselves? How important is financial literacy?
It's as important as breathing right now, because if we look at the landscape of where we are.
Financial literacy is as important as breathing.
Absolutely. Because when we look at where we are right now as a nation, especially in the communities, that's where most of people's woes, they did a study that linked a high level of depression tied to a lack of finances. And it's not that everybody is always at a lack. You'd be surprised, Doc, that how many people actually overspend. And it's because we haven't been taught about the economics of money. We've only been taught to go out and make money, try to build this lifestyle that, we admire, whether it's from our favorite celebrity or on social media, or this fallacy of what success looks like. But nobody taught us how money works. Nobody taught us about economics. And I often say that money is a language. Finance is a language. Economics is a language. But unfortunately, we've only been taught the language of poverty. So we have to change our dialect, and financial literacy is extremely important.
The language of financial literacy.
The language of it, absolutely.
Overcoming the language of poverty.
We have to.
I hope that people will respond from your lived experience
Definitely.
Of success. How early should financial literacy be taught? K through 12, college, pre-K?
I think it should be taught in middle school. I mean, it can easily be taught as low as elementary. You know, my son is 15 right now. I started building his credit at 13. And it's as simple as so at the age of 13, you can actually add your child as an authorized user on a credit card. Now, you want to make sure you pay the card on time, keep the balance low, don't get any missed payments. But all of that history will now report on their credit.
So even though it's one card, two people on one card, both benefit from the credit score.
Absolutely. Well, the information of that reporting history, because it's almost essentially like he's renting my payment history and my credit history. So now by the time he's 18, it will have already established him a credit score. So when he gets out into the real world and become an adult, now he doesn't have to need someone as a co-signer. If he decides to go to college and need housing, he has an established credit history. So I personally think we should start teaching our children at least the basics of financial literacy.
What have you learned about your career path by being in a place like Las Vegas?
That's a very good question. I would say the biggest thing I've learned, I remember, so recently I was going to dinner at one of the casinos. This was probably about a month ago. And I walked in and I noticed the casinos was packed with people gambling. And it got me to thinking, are people is financially, in a financial despair as much as they say they are? Or is it a cry for help because they don't know what to do? And because the casinos are still full. We have slot machines in Vegas. We have slot machines in the gas station. They're in the airport. They're in the grocery stores. And no matter where I go, I see people gambling. And so I would say that what it's done, and it's opened my eyes to saying, I have to get in front of more people to teach them about, how to stretch their money or how to be better stewards of their money. So I think I look at it from a different lens, and I see it more as an opportunity to help more people to become a better steward of their money.
What are some of the things you've learned as a result of your own career development that you share with, say, someone you're trying to coach?
So I tell people that, one of the questions I often ask people, I said, have you ever played the game of Monopoly? And most people said, yeah, of course I have. And I'd say, did you know that actually is the game of life? When you learn how to play Monopoly in real life, your life changes. And so when you think about the game of Monopoly, you don't just go around the board trying to collect $200. Or if that is your strategy, the only other options is paying taxes or going to jail. Versus, okay, the game of Monopoly is to get into a position of ownership. That's the only way you can win the game. And so one of the things that I'm often sharing with a lot of people is every time I sit down with a client, the first thing I do is I ask, what is your end goal? Because I think a lot of the times people go into this game of life or this financial race not having a real plan or strategy. That's why they're just aimlessly running. And so once I kind of show them, okay, what is it that you're trying to focus on? What is it that you want? You said you want to build wealth, but nothing that you're doing is wealth building strategies. You're not executing on the strategies of wealth. And so when you look at the game of Monopoly, the only way to win is by owning real estate or owning assets. And so the biggest thing that I'm really trying to teach people on this journey that I'm on is that we have to own something. We have to own assets, not only just from a short-term standpoint, but that's the only real way that you'll be able to retire.
Right. There are appreciating assets.
Appreciating.
And there are depreciating assets.
Definitely.
Can you explain the difference?
Yeah, so those luxury vehicles and fancy cars that some of us like to buy, those can be depreciating assets because they don't build equity. An appreciating asset is something that's going to grow and make money years over time versus a depreciating asset is something that loses value and it's probably going to cost you money over time.
In your strategy to acquire real estate assets,
yes,
is it both residential and commercial?
Absolutely. Anything that's going to appreciate. So because
and once you acquire the, say, commercial, you sell it, you renovate it,
no, absolutely.
you hold on to it.
I hold all my real estate. I don't sell anything. Because,
is that right?
Absolutely. Because
explain that, because
definitely.
I know a lot of people say, man, I'm going to flip this, flip this, flip that. What is your strategy in terms of real estate?
So I buy and hold. When you buy real estate and sell it, if the goal is to build wealth, and the property is the wealth asset. If you sell it, you no longer have wealth. And on top of that, you're going to pay taxes. The whole game of life to be able to keep your wealth is you have to also mitigate your tax liability. But when I buy the property, I fix it up, I rent it out, something that's going to pay me forever. Now I have an asset that is going to pay me forever. On top of that, I can leverage that to mitigate my tax liability. And so when you look at the way the wealthy play this game is because they hold a bunch of assets that appreciate. They can depreciate the value against their taxes, but then it pays them forever. And then if I ever do need to get liquid, I can borrow against that property or the asset completely tax-free. And when I started to learn those strategies, it was a game changer. So much so that about a month ago, I bought a 4-unit property in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and my 15-year-old son is the co-owner with me. So he now has his first piece of property that he will own.
Your 15-year-old son
My 15-year-old
owns property
Yes.
in Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Yes.
But he lives in Las Vegas.
In Vegas with me, yes.
So you're training your son early on.
We have to. We have to. Because in other communities, they're training their kids like it's financial war. So I instill this into my son like financial war. He has to be prepared when he gets out into the real world, because by the time he goes to college, if that's the path he chooses, they're already going to start exploiting him with credit card offers that he may not know anything about. And when I'm working with so many people, that's typically where they ruin their credit at. And so now by the time my son is 18, he has 3 paths that's going to give him an advantage in life. One, that property is going to appreciate over the next 3 years. So let's say he decides to go to college, Doc. He can borrow against that asset completely tax-free, and whatever the amount he borrows, the asset will cover the cost of that debt. So now he can go to school debt-free because the asset will cover the cost of it. Or option 2, let's say he wants to follow in his dad's footsteps and become an entrepreneur. He can borrow against that property completely tax-free and go and now start a business and deploy that capital in the right places and not be focused or operating out of a lack of integrity, trying to figure out how he's going to pay that debt back.
So, Will, you said twice, borrowing tax-free.
Absolutely.
Most people don't know that you can borrow money without paying taxes.
Yeah, so one of the strategies that the wealthy have learned is that, and I know this word is going to scare some of you, debt. Debt is tax-free. And that's why so many wealthy people leverage debt. You know, when they build a hospital or a casino or, a hotel, they don't use their own money. They borrow debt. But the reason I think so many people are scared of debt is because we don't understand that there's 3 different debt structures. You have what's called unstructured debt. That's the debt people primarily get into, which is debt that doesn't make them money. A house that they may buy, a vehicle or credit card or consumer debt. Then you have what's called restructured debt. That's bankruptcy. Unfortunately, our community has looked at bankruptcy negatively, but it's really a strategy no different than what Spirit Airlines is doing. They're just restructuring their debt, and they can still make money through that restructuring. And then you have the strategy of debt that most investors and high-level and affluent entrepreneurs use. It's called structured debt, where I can go out there and borrow X amount of dollars from the bank, deploy it into buying assets that will not only pay me a percentage of a return, but then also service the debt or how much it cost me to actually borrow the money. And so when you start to learn these strategies, you can play it at a completely different level.
And as I understand what you're teaching
Yes,
today,
sir.
You don't have to wait till you're over 21.
No, absolutely. I have 8. I start working. Matter of fact, I had an infield training event back in September. I had a 16-year-old there. So, his godmother asked, could he come to my event? I said, absolutely, because I would rather him learn how to go this path versus thinking that the streets is his answer. So I work with a lot of teens and helping them to train their mind. So by the time they're 18, they're light years ahead of sometimes their parents. So no, you don't have to wait until you're 21.
Do you help artists try to figure out how to have financial sustainability?
Oh, absolutely. I've worked with artists, athletes. I've worked with, entertainers who have Hollywood stars. And so one of the things, especially with artists that I've shown them, I said, hey, let me show you how to finance your own career. But we have to understand the strategies and we have to understand the language of how money works.
Will Roundtree.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for joining
Pleasure.
How to Get Your Money Right.
Yes, sir.